Hi, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to Philosophy Insights. In this video, Professor Tom Dilorenzo, an economics professor with 32 years of experience, including nearly 3 decades at Loyola University, shares a rare insider's perspective on why modern universities are failing. From the erosion of academic freedom to the rise of bureaucratic control, Professor Dilorenzo's first-hand observations reveal a system that has strayed far from its original mission. Here is Dilorenzo.
The whole woke stuff is the culmination of what the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci called the long march through the institutions. Okay, well, that started at the universities, the long march business. In the 1960s in America, you remember the student revolt years, all that. That's where they started teaching Gramsci. They were when they started teaching Gramsci and the other cultural Marxists, as they're called. And so if you think this was a bad thing that has happened, the long march to the institutions, well, it came from the university world. And so it's sort of embedded there. And these same people were on about the third generation now of Gramscians. One of my faculty colleagues at my university was a lawyer who she introduced a course called Critical Thinking. And I knew what this was about because it was Marxism. It came from Marxism, but nobody else in the business school seemed to know about it. And everybody else thought, well, yeah, we should teach our students to think critically. That's a good idea. Who could be against this? And I asked her, well, what disciplines do you rely on? Philosophy or what is it? And she said, no, we just criticize people like you. And she was telling the truth. She was speaking the truth about that. Critical thinking. Most faculties, in my experience, there are exceptions to this, but they seem to be enemies of academic freedom and the whole business of peer-reviewed research being so biased. If you really had genuine academic freedom, you wouldn't have that. That's why it's so, the internet has broken this up a lot. You read Mises.org on a daily basis, and you'll get a very different view of the world than you would if you just go to a university and listen to lectures by left-wing professors for 4 years. And that, by the way, is Doug Casey's rationale for why he wrote this book. He said, why send your child to be bombarded with left-wing propaganda for 4 years in return for a degree that they may or may not be able to use to get a job with?
Professor Dilorenzo's experience highlights a serious problem. When academic freedom is no longer a guiding principle, universities lose their credibility as places of open inquiry. Instead of fostering debate and focus on quality scholarships, many institutions now promote narrow ideological perspectives, often enforced through biased peer review, rigid control over research topics, and bad incentives in the funding structures.
I already mentioned administrators can be tyrants and dictators who are answer to no one. And I've observed that. I was the university economics professor for 41 years, and very few of the top administrators that I knew, did not behave like that. Maybe it's just my bad luck of the universities that I happened to be employed by. But my last one, Loyola University, 28 years. That's where the university president told Tom Clancy, "No thanks, we don't need your money anymore." And so talk about acting like a dictator. Okay. Faculty pay scales are kind of rigid and fixed, in the business world. If you have a high performer and you don't pay that person what the competition is going to pay that person, then you'll lose out on all the money that high performer can make for you. And so it's in your self-interest to have to pay people according to merit and productivity. But my experience at private university, which Loyola is, and state universities, I taught at George Mason for 8 years and University of Tennessee. SUNY Buffalo was my first job early out of graduate school. They're kind of rigid. They're kind of like the public schools by seniority. You're paid in a very narrow range by seniority, assistant professor, associate professor, and there's no real rewards of any real significance typically to the high achievers within the university. You might get grants and recognition and awards and things like that, but the universities tend to pay like socialist institutions. And so they don't, merit pay, a lot of them try, but they don't seem to do a very good job with all that. And these things are all things that can be changed, I hope, that I'm talking about. Most universities, I think, are run, the policies that they adopt, they always have a lot of committees. Universities have a lot of committees. I've even observed it, when I first got to George Mason back, I think it was 116 years ago today. It was when I arrived there. It was sort of just getting out of being a community college. It's a big mega university now, but it was hardly any bureaucracy, hardly any committees, and in just the 8 years I was there, the place turned into a bureaucratic nirvana with all the committees.
What Professor Dilorenzo describes here is something many outside academia rarely see, a culture where bureaucracy thrives and actual scholarship takes a back seat. In this environment, it's often not the most productive or insightful scholars who shape university policy, but rather those who focus on climbing the internal administrative ladder. This shift rewards mediocrity and punishes excellence, creating a system that resists change and innovation. It's a powerful insight into why so many universities today seem disconnected from both academic rigor and real-world relevance.
And now, from an economic perspective, here's how it works. The people who are the low producers, who don't produce much scholarship, they're the people who get on the committees because they know they're not going to get rewarded for their scholarship because they're not scholars. But they can get rewarded at pay raise time, and I'm talking 4% pay raise instead of a 2% pay raise. There's some people, in my experience, that would stab their mother to death with a fork for a 4% pay raise instead of a 2% pay raise with all the effort they put into it. And so the busybodies are the ones who get on the committees, and they don't tend to be the real productive people. The real productive people, the opportunity cost is too high to take half of their work time away from their research and their writing. It's too high, so they do whatever they can to stay away from committees, and so. But then there are other people who are they zero in on them. The woman who created the course in critical thinking, she's a Marxist. She seemed to be on every university committee in the whole university. I don't think I ever heard of a committee she wasn't on of any sort. And the one committee I got on was every year they would give all the freshmen one book, freshman orientation to read. That's back when college students read books. They don't anymore. And supposedly they would have, in the dorms, and they would have a faculty member, and there would be discussions of this one book just to sort of start them out on the culture of reading and discussing books. And that went on forever at Loyola University. And so one year, the School of Business, it was their turn to pick the book. And so the chairman of the economics department came to me and said to me, well, you're the only member of the department who reads books, so why don't you go on the committee? And oh, honest to God, he said that. And so these are college professors. And so, I even write books. I was very unusual there. And this dean, the dean that I badmouthed earlier, she once told me that we don't place any value on publishing of books. That's only journal articles that they place value on. And because, peer-reviewed journal articles. Okay, well, anyway, and I asked her, will that include like a Harvard University Press book that sells 1 million copies? And she said, yeah, we don't value books for reaccreditation. She might have just been discriminating against me because she didn't like my books, but that's what she told me. So the faculty committee, but anyway, the Marxist who created the critical thinking, she was on all the committees at all time, and she was on this committee, the book choosing committee. And so I picked out a book that I thought, it's for the business school. There was a book about, sort of a business history book, like stories about John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil and things like that I thought, it's not heavy economic theory, but it's basically stories of entrepreneurship. I thought that the whole student body could read a book like that. But this woman, the busybody, she and a colleague of hers threw a fit over that because she told me there are not enough stories of women in the book. And the stories were all in 19th century, with the robber baron era and all that good stuff. Yeah, and so not enough women and not enough minorities in the book, and so that didn't that, and everybody else thought it was a great idea on the committee. They all thought this is perfect. These are business school professors, but these two prevailed. They got the dean to appoint some guy, another faculty member, to be the one person to choose the book instead of the committee. And so he chose some New York Times author, some guy that writes for the New York Times to write a book. And he was a lawyer too. They hired lawyers to teach business law in the business school. So the faculty committees tend to be dominated by losers for the most part, because the opportunity cost of being a committee monkey is too high for the productive people. For years, the academic world complained about capitalism, saying there's a separation of ownership from control. When the business world went from dominated by sole proprietorships to corporations, well, the owners are now the stockholders, and the controllers are the managers. And so beginning in the 1930s, there were all these calls for more government regulation of corporations to make sure that the managers did what the owners wanted them, the stockholders wanted them to do, the SEC regulation and everything else. But I would argue that if that's a problem, there's a massive separation of ownership from control in the university world. The controllers are these people that there are no stockholders, no real customers, no elections, and yet the public, through tax dollars, gives them billions and billions every year. And so, we're the owners, supposedly, taxpayers, giving them all this money, but we have no control whatsoever what goes on in the...
As Professor Dilorenzo's experience shows, the challenges facing universities today are not accidental. They're a result of decades of shifting priorities and growing bureaucracy. For more discussions like this, subscribe and hit the bell.